Welcome to MMT Chats. This episode is brought to you by ISCAR with new ideas for machining intelligently. Hey MMT followers, I'm Christina Fuges with MoldMaking Technology, and my guest on today's MMT Chat is Sasha Stojanovic of Pyramid Molding Group. Actually, the division is Industrial Molds of the Pyramid Molding Group. So Sasha is one of MoldMaking Technology's 30 under 30 honorees. So hi, Sasha.
Hi, Christina.
So first off, I have to say congratulations. And how does it feel to be nominated and selected as one of our 30 under 30?
It's an honor. It's exciting. It's nice to know that I'm appreciated here.
That's cool. All right. So why don't you explain what your current position is and what do you do every day?
Currently, I'm a mold designer, industrial molds. I design molds and I also perform modifications to molds that come in. We work with our own CAD that we make here from scratch, or CAD that we receive from customers or other mold shops.
So how often do you communicate with the guys with the mold builders, out of curiosity?
The mold builders? Daily. Yeah. Daily, actually. Outside of that door back there is our shop. So they are feet away from me.
That's always been, for as long as I've been covering mold making, it's gotten better, but there's always kind of been that wall between the two aspects of getting a mold built. But I like to see when it's very collaborative. So that's good to know you guys have that. All right. So why don't I want to give the viewers an idea of how you got to where you are. So I'm always interested in hearing your background, your exposure to manufacturing, education, job history. I think it's a really good way to kind of promote the types of people that end up in this field, because what I'm learning is all of the 30 are very different in your backgrounds. So give us a little snapshot.
Okay. When I was in high school, I wanted to do trades a lot, but I just did very, very well in math and science. So I decided to go to college for mechanical engineering. I went to Northern Illinois University in DeKalb. I didn't end up getting any internships there. So when I graduated, I was kind of poking around, looking for things that interested me and looking at larger companies in the area. And I happened to live down the street from Industrial, actually. And we did one project at NIU that had to do with mold design. So I decided to apply and I came here. I had my interview and they welcomed me in and I got started. School really doesn't teach you as much as didn't teach me as much as I thought it did.
Right.
So when I started here, there was a big learning gap with mold design and with a lot of manufacturing things, but they kind of eased me into it with a couple of practice molds, and obviously working so closely with the mold builders out there, it kind of helped me learn everything really, from machinability to complex mechanics in the mold.
It's funny how you bring up how school, that theory is, it sounds like most colleges and universities are strong in theory, but lack that real world experience. And I've heard that over and over again, especially this past year with COVID for some reason. It's really put an emphasis on that lack of training. So it ties nicely into what you just said about learning on the job, getting your hands, that's how you learn better. I also need you to talk about, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, to mentoring. Mentoring it's a big word that's used a lot. It's a hot topic. Everyone kind of defines it differently. So first I wanted to see, how do you, Sasha, define mentoring? And then how does that play out within industrial every day? Because that's critical to learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I would define mentoring as guidance, but mostly the sharing of experience, kind of bridging the gap to somebody else's experience that I do not have. So here I have my engineering manager, Ray Gibler, and our engineering director, Randy Hansen, and I learned a lot from them. They're older than me. They've been in the industry, obviously, much, much, much longer than me. So they're kind of my go-to people for anything I need.
What do you say is your number one challenge so far in your career there?
I think the number one challenge was, as you said, some places have a gap between the mold builders and the designers or engineers. The big gap there was machinability and kind of ease of assembly. And yeah, when I started, obviously certain ways that I wanted to design wouldn't really work out for either one. And then the longer I've worked here, the more they've kind of taught me, the mold builders, how I should go about it and what's easiest for them.
I was going to say, is that learning by trying and making mistakes, or it sounds like it's more learning by someone kind of coaching you on what they know,
Mhm.
right? What they've learned.
With each mold we do, we do like an internal meeting where we get together with the mold builder, our foreman, and our account managers, and then we also have a manufacturing meeting where we get kind of more in depth on the smaller changes. And in those two meetings, the mold builder will kind of guide us along to what they want changed or how they want something assembled.
Communication, right? It's all about
Absolutely.
communication. All right. So since, how long have you been in industrial molds?
I started November of 2019.
Okay. So for as long as you've been there, what do you think has been the biggest like misconception that you've had and it's kind of been busted? Like it's been dispelled since you've been there, where you were like, oh wow, I thought it was like that. It ain't nothing like that. Give me
Mhm.
an example.
Big misconception I had about design in general. I always thought I'd end up in part design or something, didn't really know much about tool design. When I saw the scale of these molds, when I first started, I really didn't believe how fast turnaround times were. Back then, if somebody told me, 2, maybe 3 weeks at a time, you'll be designing something like this, I would have said they were crazy. But the more I've been at it, the more it's kind of falling in and coming together. But yeah, turnaround times are for designs is definitely something that
Eye-opening.
surprised me. Yeah.
That's funny. What would be the most interesting technology that you've either seen or you've used and why?
I didn't have much exposure to machining beforehand, and we have a pretty good EDM department here, and I always found that very interesting. Actually, walking by, just seeing these things work underwater, it's very interesting to me.
It is kind of cool. It's cool to watch. All of it's cool to
Mhm.
watch. Are you kidding me? It's like it's like eye candy, they say. That's why I
Mhm.
always think it would be, you would think this industry would be an easy or second nature for a young person to get into because it's all about computers and software and animation, robotics, yeah, machining, chips flying. It's like there's so
Mhm.
much going on that you think it would be appealing, but yeah, I just think it's a giant marketing problem at this point, you know?
Mhm.
So, what is the most interesting aspect of your job day to day and why?
Day to day, maybe we'll say day to day, but I'm exposed to new projects week to week, that's for sure. It's a constant turnaround. Certain things stay the same, we'll use production mold bases, stuff like that, but
Okay.
every part is obviously split differently and has different mechanics in it. And I think it's a job that doesn't stall out. It doesn't get boring. If you get burnt out on one thing, something new will come soon afterwards.
I believe that. That's what I always, when people ask me, what's the difference between like a mold builder and a job shop, a production shop? And I'm like, oh, everything that comes through is like this unique, custom, one-off part, and
Hmm.
they're so complex. So it's not like you're running the same thing over and over again. And that's what I think that's a big misconception too, just lumping a mold builder in with every other job shop. Not to insult job shops, it's just there's a
Hmm.
definitely a different environment and different skill set.
Yeah.
So, in terms of actual projects that you've worked on and you've been part of, what has been the most exciting or most interesting project, and what has been your role with that project?
Um, are we okay to say company names or should I work around it?
Work around it just in case.
Okay. We did these COVID testing kit things, and it was a overmold and then a pre-mold. And I worked on the excuse me, I worked on the overmold portion of it. And it was very interesting. We received files from a different company, but we had to prep them and kind of tune them as we went. And towards the end, once it was assembled, it was on us to kind of groom it because this was a very
Mm,
quick turnaround as far as design goes. So we would have these massive kind of conference type meetings with everybody involved getting together and throwing out ideas. And yeah, and it took us a couple of attempts, but we got it all tuned out. And then my personal project that I designed, I did it was a gas tank for a leaf blower,
okay.
and it was a family mold, the top and bottom, and it had a
Ooh,
ton of mechanics. It was my magnum opus for the previous year. It had,
wow.
A side lifters, it had multiple slides at an angle, hydraulic pulling, all that.
That's
So
cool. Works of art is what I say. Works of art,
yeah.
these things are. All right, so let's segue to workforce development. And can you talk a little bit about especially with the past year, with things have gotten different. There's no more trade shows. There's not a lot of customer visits. Like there had to be a challenge in terms of staying up to speed with education and training that typically would happen outside the shop. Can you talk about that at all and how industrials kind of addressed that during this
Hmm.
past year?
Well, unfortunately for me, I started, and then the whole
Nah.
COVID situation started not soon afterwards. So I don't really know much about how it was beforehand as far as training. Um, I've done a couple of webinars
Okay.
for like mold flow software. It's been a lot of like go-to and Teams and stuff like that.
Is
I
that
believe
pretty,
they're,
for your generation, is that pretty natural for you to interact and work and learn that way?
well, I mean, I went to school in person, obviously it was pre-COVID, so I was used to that, and that's kind of what I anticipated for
Mm,
training. But most of my training has been either like pre-recorded online stuff or
yeah.
live
Virtual
online
events,
meeting
right?
sessions. Yeah, virtual events. Yep.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
manager right now, he's at a conformal cooling event though, and that's in person somewhere in
Oh,
Ohio. So I
wow.
things are
Oh,
opening up.
is that the AMUG event? Do you know in
I'm
Cincinnati?
not sure. I didn't catch
Okay.
the name. It
Ooh,
was
that's
very
exciting.
before he left. It got very hectic, so
Yeah.
we didn't get to discuss it much.
That's a cool hot topic too. I'm sure that's involving a little bit of 3D printing out there too, talking about that option to make them, right? It's
Hmm.
exciting. So, what do you believe when you think about this next generation continuing to come into mold making and maybe manufacturing in general? What do you think has to change in the environment or anything about it to attract that next generation to consider this as a career path?
Um, it's hard to say. Like our tool makers out there, our mold builders are, they're getting older. We have a couple of younger
Mhm.
guys, and I think what I'm seeing a lot, at least the people I've been exposed to, is most designers are either engineers or they came off the floor. The guys that came off the floor have a lot more experience. Software is easy to learn, but I think the industry needs to understand that most younger people coming in now won't be off the floor. They're going to be engineers, and I think they need to reach out to schools and kind of expose tool making in general more to students because we performed like a mold flow project in
Okay.
college, but that was about all my experience with mold making.
Hmm.
Um, the actual tool design side was absent
Yeah, I
completely
hear that a
in
lot.
the curriculum.
Yeah,
And
I hear that that's a missing piece in the education system is that.
yep, and I think just the industry needs to understand more and more younger people are going to be coming from higher education. They're going to be engineers, and they need to be reached kind of beforehand because school does not really teach us what we need, and
The
the industry
hands-on.
needs to be open to training us.
It's like a nice blend between that engineering from the school, right? The book smart and the hands-on smart. And it's interesting that you're saying this because it seems the future of this industry is not to downplay anything that happens on the shop floor because a lot's happening there and it's critical. But it seems the future of this industry is in engineering. Like think about the technology that's advancing. That mold in itself is a machine, So the more you spend the time to put into engineer right into that tool in the front end, that's design and engineering. So I agree with you. Like that is something that we have to pay more attention to because that's where the industry is. That's where the industry's going. So with that being said, what do you think is the number one skill or maybe attribute of someone that is going to be successful in mold making? What do you think they have to have?
Ooh, definitely dedication. That's
Hmm.
that's number one. There is, as you said earlier, there is so much to mold building. I don't know what background a person can come from, but you're not gonna know everything. It doesn't work that way. So dedication to keep at it, keep learning, learn as much as possible about every aspect of mold making is definitely the most important thing.
Do you
Everything
think
else falls into place after that.
do you think most people your age come into a work environment ready to learn, or do you think they come in ready to take over the world? They're just so aggressive and passionate. Um, that they go in that way. Do you see any difference, or what's your take on that?
I found a lot of people in my generation seem to be a lot more humble. So I wouldn't call us aggressive. I would say we're humble and we're ready to learn and kind of harvest from people around us to get better and get to a point where we're confident and, can take over the world. But
Exactly. So where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I would like to remain in mold design. Uh, Maybe if a really good opportunity opens up in part design, that's something I'm open
Oh,
to as well.
um, last but not least, if I asked you to sell mold making as a career to a kid in middle school, what would be your
Mhm.
sales pitch?
My sales pitch? Well, if kids were interested in STEM and trades, it'd be easy to answer.
Exactly. What if they're not? That's the key, right?
I don't think you will be able to reach the people that are not, but I
Mm.
think finding kids that are interested in design and math and science, or even working with their hands, putting
Yep.
stuff together, they need to be made aware that there are careers that focus on that, and mold building is one of them. Tool
Yeah.
making is one of them. Mold
All right.
design is one of them.
Yeah, actually, right. If you think about design all the way to first shot, and even on the processing end, right? Because I know pyramid molding gets into that end of the process too. So once that mold
Hmm.
goes into to the machine, there's a whole other world, right? That what you make goes on even longer to make those parts and all that's involved in that end of the process. There's so
Hmm.
much opportunity. Well, thank you, Sasha. Congrats again, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with me to shed some light on who you are, where you came from, and what this industry means to you and what it's done for you. And I just appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you as well. Thank you for your time.
And to everyone watching, remember, for everything mold making, visit moldmakingtechnology.com. Stay safe and healthy, and more importantly, stay informed and stay inspired.